Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. You're on Iron Radio again. This is Phil Stevens, freshly back from Montana, and I am a strength coach, powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and youth sport coach.
Hey, this is Dr. Mike Nelson, Associate Professor of the Carrigan Institute, creator of the Flex Diet Cert and the Phys Flex Cert, and also just back from the same seminar in Montana. We got back late Tuesday night.
Coach Darrell with Strength Guild in KC, so weightlifting coach, strength and conditioning coach, and gym owner.
All right, and this is Lonnie Lowry, an exercise physiology and nutrition professor for 25 years or so, a former competitive bodybuilder of almost that long. We have some listener mail, if you will. This is a comment from YouTube, and it's sort of a loaded one, so I wanted to address this in the first part of the show. After this, Phil, you said you wanted to talk about like nature versus nurture and how people fight back.
I don't know, the mental toughness side of things. Like how do you act? How does an athlete act when they face adversity?
Okay.
I guess. And nature versus nurture.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I just feel like we've been remiss, and a lot of times people tune in. I mean, sure, they can see the title of the show, but let's tell them what we're going to shoot the shit about after. But let's get to this sort of mail and news. This is from Marlon S.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This is actually 2 weeks ago. He posted this. He said, do you think that SLUP, S-L-U-P-P 332, would be used by the U.S. Army branches? The reason I ask is because of a recent bill that was passed which will automatically draft people. Now, again, we were talking about this. I'm not sure that's in full effect right now, but there has been talk about this sort of thing. Anyway, partly because people are, mostly, overweight, sometimes extremely overweight, or have a mental and health condition. So I can see he's putting two and two together like, well, if the Army is going to try to recruit people and we literally have a national security problem because we're so unfit, are they just going to say, take the pill? And I know Mike and I saw a guy that recently spoke about this. Mike will talk about this as well. But he says also, what does SLUPP332 do to mitochondrial function when it's combined with exercise like HIIT training, strength training, and fasting? Does it enhance its function? Maybe you could talk about this on an episode of the podcast. Okay, so here's what I've got. The American Chemical Society, this March, so 2024, has a press release here, and this is a follow-up on maybe just a year or two of research that I've been seeing, but of course this goes back farther. Mimicking exercise in a pill for immediate release. It says, doctors have long prescribed exercise to improve and protect health. In the future, a pill may offer some of the benefits of exercise. Now, researchers report on a new compound that appears capable of mimicking the physical boost of working out, at least within rodent cells. This discovery could lead to a new way to treat muscular atrophy and other medical conditions in people, including heart failure and neurodegenerative disease. So according to Baha El-Jendi, the project's principal investigator, who is presenting the work at the meeting, says, if I can exercise, I should go ahead and get the physical activity, but there are so many cases where, of course, a substitute is needed. A drug that can mimic these effects could offset muscle atrophy, et cetera, et cetera. I'll spare everybody the full press release. Metabolic changes associated with exercise kick off with the activation of specialized proteins known as estrogen-related receptors, which come in three forms, alpha, beta, gamma. After about a decade of work, El-Jendi and his colleagues developed a compound, SLU-PP-332, which activates all three forms, including the challenging one, ERR-alpha. Basically, what they're showing is this improves fatigue resistance. It improves their endurance, again, when they run like a little rodent treadmill. It says to identify this molecule, researchers scrutinize the structure of these estrogen-related receptors. And my understanding is these are like orphan receptors, right? It's a parking spot without a car, right? It's a receptor without a known agonist to bind into it. And so they're analyzing the receptor because, of course, they want to patent something. They're like, hey, let's come up with this. Now, this makes me feel a little bit weird. I feel like Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park right now because it's like we're going to look at something, and just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it. We're going to actually invent a hormone to fit in this orphan receptor. Yeah. Maybe that's an orphan for a reason because of evolution. I don't know. Anyway, the team compared the potency of SLU-PP332 by looking at the RNA response of a cell, essentially. So they looked at 15,000 different genes. The new compounds prompted a greater increase in the presence of the RNA, right, the message for new proteins, suggesting they more potently stimulate the effects of exercise. Studies in animals with the preliminary compound indicate that it could have benefits against obesity, heart failure, and the kidney decline with age. ERR activity also appears to counter damaging processes that occur in the brain with Alzheimer's. If you look at the sponsor, this is sponsored by the National Institute of Aging, amongst other sort of government-level agencies. So this isn't like industry-sponsored alone. But clearly they're looking at patents. I mean, everything here in late-stage capitalism is how are we going to patent this and ka-ching. I'm going to just very briefly point to two abstracts so our listeners can follow up if they want. This first one, 2023, synthetic ERR alpha beta gamma agonist induces exercise ERR alpha dependent acute aerobic exercise response and enhances exercise capacity. So that's one. This is by Billen and colleagues, it looks like. And again, that's American Chemical Society 2023. So yeah, there's papers on this. Here's another one. Also Billen and colleagues. So yeah, I'm thinking lots of financial drive here. Journal of Pharmacology and Experimental Therapeutics, I think, 2024. A synthetic ERR agonist alleviates muscle metabolic syndrome. And if you go look at these things, you will see stuff like increased energy expenditure, increased fatty acid oxidation, decreased fat accumulation. Looks like a lot of rodent studies, exercise in a pill, and then with the added caveat of should the military just hand these out? All right, so that's a lot. I know that's loaded, but Phil, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I would want to know the long-term effects. Number one, I mean, that's always what I shoot for. I mean, that's like I've told people with anything new. Like we talked about previously on the show about like all this arms and stuff coming. I was like, red flag. Like, tell me the side effects, and is there any news on like is this stuff lasting and things like that? But I mean, I get where they're coming from because it's got to be tough to be in the military, and just from dealing with the populations I deal with right now, it's like how out of shape we are as a culture in athletics. Like we got kids that just don't know how to move their bodies anymore. So I can see where that would be tough on them. They're looking something to help this population that's coming in, but at some point, not that the military worries about it 10 years down the road.
No, I was just going to say that.
That's the problem, but
right.
That's what I would lean towards. It's like, what am I doing to these people? So. But
yeah, I mean, good point. Like, let's get them combat ready, and if this causes cancer when they're 50,
we'll deal with that later.
Yeah. But for right now, we're going to rip 20 or 30 pounds of fat off of them and make them stronger and fatigue resistant. I mean, if that's true, because you're right. In people, who knows, long term or even short term, or the kind of additional question he asked, which was, what about stacking it with, exercise training? I mean, this could blunt it. Like we know that like metformin does some cool stuff to your metabolism, but it might blunt training adaptations, or antioxidants do that too, like high dose C and E. Yeah. So would it stack and improve, or would it kind of contradict it? But Mike, you were mentioning, we saw an interesting talk almost annually, right, about the military at ISSN.
Yeah, Dr. Brandon Roberts did a great talk, just kind of outlining with the military, like what are your options for, some of the new physical standards and, potential use of weight loss drugs, especially with the advent now of basically, Wegovy, Ozempic, kind of more the common names, I guess, for those class of drugs. And just long story short is they're looking at it as an option. Basically, the military has looked at all options of most things most of the time. So Yeah, on the drug side, they tend to be sometimes a little bit later to adopt stuff, and then sometimes very early in other areas. It just seems a little sporadic depending on what area. But yeah, I mean, I think it is an option. He talks about they've got other kind of, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, classes and things people can do to try to get them in shape, for just enrollment and different things. And this is not really a new issue. I think going all the way back to JFK talked about that in terms of the physical readiness of, citizens related to the military. So unfortunately, it's only gotten worse over time.
Worse. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine if you could come up with some drug that for some reason doesn't have many side effects, that's a pretty massive if, but I don't know. I never would have thought we would have a class of drugs that pretty much crushes appetite, and now we have the inverse problem of people not eating enough and just crash dieting too hard. Mm-hmm. So I never thought that was going to happen in my lifetime. And
yeah,
it's kind of sort of happened, so I don't know anymore about stuff.
Yeah, but the other thing that, like, generally, when you look at drugs across just a broad spectrum, look at them, generally, the more effective they are, the more side effects they have.
Correct.
I mean, that's what scares me.
In general.
Like, if something is really, really effective, that means there's really, really something bad going on there too. Like, Tren is really amazing drug, but as far as strength and things, but also the side effects are much more drastic. It tends to be that's what happens. So, I mean, if this thing is really effective, I mean, the other thing I can see where they're coming from to a point if he's talking about like a draft.
Yeah.
Like, okay, World War III kicks off. We have like 8 weeks to get you ready. At that point, you do whatever the fuck you do to put people out there.
Yeah.
Like, we need boots on the ground. Here you go.
Yeah.
I'm turning towards other things too. I mean, these guys are going to be stacked on all kinds of shit.
But yeah, those are, you said it before, those are things with known history. That's a known quantity,
right?
As opposed to SLUPP 332.
That's my biggest problem with anything new, is that it hasn't been around long enough to actually know what we're combating on the other side, on the bad sides. So
my curiosity would be, how far would it get you? Because usually I kind of get this feeling about some of the drugs, well, in either class, basically with fat loss or, I mean, the hypothetical performance style stuff is, in this case, is like, would it get you, like, all right, maybe it's like a 10%, 20% boost on like on the front end, but if you have these issues on the back end where it, blunts the response to exercise, and then the effect diminishes over time, or like kind of starts to shrink down, as most kind of drug stuff does, then how far can you get with someone who's like way out of shape, and then you get them on some stuff, and maybe you're trying to exercise, and like Phil said, like, let's say 8 weeks. We need 8 weeks. We need to get you in as best shape as possible. But the exercise effect is blunted, and we only get you so far. Mm-hmm. Whereas exercise has a sustainable, I would even say like kind of exponential effect over time, where like you start small and you can do hardly anything. Then like a year from then, you're like a completely different person if you're consistent. If that's not the case with any of the drugs that you would use, and then you have this diminishing effect and you make exercise harder, it's like, it feels like we're kind of going backwards at that point. We're not going to get anybody who's getting to the, the end of quote unquote the fitness journey. They're just, kind of getting a decent start. Now, if it works perfectly, right, then great. But a lot of times with this stuff, I feel like you have a one or the other. Like, okay, we can use the drug and some moderate exercise, and we can get good effects for X amount of time. But after a while, even that becomes like somewhat of an issue. So if you can't get to the end, like starting, I feel like it'd be problematic almost.
Well, I think it also ignores, and like Lonnie said before the show started, this leads right into the topic that we'll talk about later, but the pill and exercise and a pill ignores maybe the bigger thing that happens in training in my mind, and that's the mental side of things. Like, it's ignoring the fact that there is a lot of what you gain in training is just facing adversity, learning how to face, like, I got to go in and I got to train hard. And a lot of that is mental. It's just the ability to fight against resistance, literally. And you have to be mentally equipped for that. And that comes in time, and your ability to do that gets greater in time. The more you train, like I see it all the time with lifters. It's like we talked about, most new people fail when things get hard, not when they're actually reaching their physical abilities. Oh, it's hard, boom, and they fail a squat. But over time, over a year, 2 years, they learn how to fight through things better. And if you're just taking a pill for that, like, when you really face resistance, you'll still just quit. You've gained nothing.
Right. Yeah. No, right. I mean, imagine having a military full of lean, powerful wimps, right? Yeah. That would be the risk, because the mind doesn't come along on the journey, right? For a lot. I mean, even on the biology side, on the physical side, we've said this about some of the SARMs, I think, before, but they're talking about starting the biochemical pathway to get, like, whether it's mitochondrial biogenesis or whatever it is, exercise effects. They're starting the biochemical pathway, but in this case, it's without all the other acute things that are happening. Like, you don't get that surge in adrenaline or other hormones as you start to exercise. You don't get the mechanosensing from the muscle, which maybe this is all part of the biochemistry, but Mike and I especially have seen our share of biochemists rationalizing. Look at this elaborate pathway. Therefore, this will happen. And they're trying to sell it because they want to get the drug patented. It's like, that's logical, but we don't know if that's physiological, But to your point, even beyond stuff like hormones or mechanosensing or the other things that come along, the nervous system activation, all the things that happen, your mind's not even coming along for the ride.
Yeah.
So, this just opens up huge cans of worms. But you know what? We're going to sound old school because well, let me put it to you this way. Jarrell, is this kind of stuff a threat to you as a gym owner? I mean, are people going to be just taking SARMs and taking their SLUP 332 and then I'm not going to go to the gym? I mean, what do you see as a future for gym owners? Is this a threat, or are you like, no way, man, it's never going to,
I mean, it could be. Like I said, if it works perfect, yeah, I mean, it would be. I mean, from what Phil's saying, and I would agree with this, and I'm just going to use this term like loosely here, but not specifically. But there's like a kind of spiritual transformation you get when you actually commit to like truly transforming, and it's not just what happens on the outside. It's like things that happen in between your ears and just in general, like your ability to be presented with a challenge and your like sustainability towards that challenge too. Not just like, here's a hard thing, I'm going to push myself and overcome it. But I came to the gym, 3 days a week, every week for a whole year. Something happens with that consistency that, it's hard to define, which is why I kind of use the spiritual growth on that aspect. So if that happens and we do lose gyms, then I mean, it would be a threat to us. But I think even worse is like just the kind of spiritual fabric of our society would be crumbling at that point when we're trying to sanitize hard work out of the equation altogether. Hard work, consistency, all the things that go into it that you get benefits from that aren't immediately available to you in the mirror. It's like you have a huge gap there. And the same with the military. Like, I mean, let's say you can get someone, you just shoot them up with stuff, and in 12 weeks they're jacked and physically well prepared. Well, they're just the meat. The people who still, the real warriors still are going to have to, train and do stuff. Like, there's something else that happens with training that I think people don't really give enough credit to. But no, I mean, as far as like, the marketing advertising aspect of it, oh yeah, it could kill gyms for sure.
Because I mean, you look at it, and the vast majority of our population doesn't want work. They want a pill that'll fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it would definitely do it. But I think that said, I mean, the people that long term, it would instantly hurt those people that show up to your gym for a short period of time.
Yeah,
But
January 1st.
Yeah, it would kill the January 1st crowd. But I'm not sure it would take away the people that actually do it still. Because, I mean, let's be serious. Like, it's a very small percentage of the population that actually just habitually likes training. Anyways, like today, without the pill. So I'm not sure it would change that group much at all. Now, they might use it. Like, if it was actually truly effective, they might do both. And let it enhance their ability, their mental drive to get in there and face adversity. But I'm not sure it would. It's a special person that wants to go train hard. That's the thing that keeps people going. I mean, that's why only a certain amount of people make it to elite athletics. They're wired that way.
You know, the World Kendo Federation, one of their principles is the use of the sword. You know, they practice with the bokken, right? The wooden swords a lot. And Jarrell, you can identify with this, I'm sure, with the jiu-jitsu and everything. But the use of the sword to develop the character, that's one of their principles. It's not to strike harder or faster or necessarily win a tournament. That might be built in. But it's to develop the character, sort of kind of that spiritual argument. I love what Jarrell said about sanitize. You're sanitizing the process. Where's the blood, sweat, and tears? You know, my question is, to your point, Phil, what if the people who just want to go be a warrior, they just want to attack the weight, or they want to develop their character or build their spirit, is that 10%? I mean, imagine if all of a sudden 90% of the people aren't going to gyms anymore. It's going to be transformational. It would make me weep. Gyms go the way of the VCR tape shop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't want to see that happen. Technology destroyed it. You know, video killed the radio star, all that stuff.
I don't know if it's possible. I mean, that would take one hell of a drug. Is the problem. I mean, it would be something that drastically better than anything we've seen. Because people, even anabolic steroids, the general population still has a Captain America movie view of those, to where, like, you shoot somebody up and then 38 seconds later they're freaking jacked.
Boom.
You know, and that's what the average person really thinks happens. And, like, even with those, you got to work. You know, if you just take a bunch of testosterone and sit on your couch and eat bonbons and watch the latest series on TV, like, nothing's going to happen. Nothing good. You're not going to get any of the good side of it.
You're going to be a water ball, bloated water ball. Yeah.
So, I mean, it would have to be a really good drug. Like I said, many times better than anything we've seen. So, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it'll feel it. I'm not sure it'll affect it. Now, will there be a down amount of people that come in the gym? Yeah, of course there is. But we got that now with frickin' Ozempic and everything else.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm not sure it'd be much greater than that.
Maybe we lucked out historically, because you're right. Anabolic androgenic steroids enhance the training experience, right? They do help a little with aggression or pain management or strength. They're not just, muscle building agents. They do other things, but they have to be used with training.
Yes.
Right?
I mean,
and so that's a good point about this comment, is what happens when you stack it with HIIT or strength training. Man, this is so early, we don't know. This is rat stuff, but there's no doubt, to Mike's point, you think they're not thinking GLP-1 agonists in the back of their mind, like marketing, like, wow, this is riches to be had. And that's why they release a press release like this, right? Like, exercise in a pill. Well, this is not the first time we've heard that title on a,
No, I mean, it's like all the money that's been dumped into myostatin stuff. Like, like, if they can do it, it'd be awesome. But,
right? Pictures of the bulls, and the dogs, and
exactly,
right?
But even some of those people who have, at least in humans, the genetic mutation for that, the muscle that forms is not nearly as, for lack of a better word, functional either.
Yes.
So it's bigger, but in terms of function, it appears, last time I looked at some of that research, is there's something a little off about it.
Yeah, I guess that's where we're going to differ, because my first gut reaction to that was, so what?
And if your own goal is like hypertrophy,
exactly
great.
For bodybuilders,
It's a
amazing.
performance athlete, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I told you, loaded question, right? There's the military,
Yeah.
there's stack it with exercise. It's the could we, should we, coulda, woulda, shoulda, like early stage. Yeah, lots going on there to unpack.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to break, and when we come back, Phil will take us toward more of the mental side. Hey, everybody. Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio / Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So I'm just bringing this topic up because it came up a lot in the seminar we were at this weekend. And then it came up yesterday on the football field with my athletes. And, it's the mental side of things. If you look across the history of athletics, like those people that are great have a mental side that, like, when they're smacked in the mouth, that's usually the best thing you can do to them. You look at Michael Jordan and things like that. Like the best thing as far as he went that you could do to him is beat him. And now he's got a checklist like, I'm coming back and I'm coming back hard. Or my boys yesterday on the field, like it was our first time really facing adversity. We threw pads on. We had a padded practice against a good team. And like, we didn't know, like, what are these kids going to do when they get smacked in the mouth? It's like the whole Rocky thing. The cliche saying is like, it's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about keep getting up. And what I'm wondering is just talk about if there's is that nature versus nurture? Are you born with this or can it be trained? Because I'm still muddy on this topic. I mean, I'm leaning more towards like, it's just something somebody has. And that's what makes the elite people special. Because I don't know if it's trainable. I really don't. I know I can get people mentally stronger and like learn where failure is and things like that. But like trying to explain to somebody, like trying to explain to my lineman yesterday, like you need to come into this, like knowing, like most elite athletes firmly believe in their heart, even if they aren't the best, they believe they're the best out there. Like you can't beat me. I'm going to win. And you need to come in, like, how do you get that into somebody, or can you? Or is it just wired that way? I mean, like we talked about before the show, I think in a lot of people you see it, like people that have faced adversity early in life, like real adversity, tend to be more driven that way. But was it already there? Like, were they already mentally wired? Is the reason they made it through that early adversity is because they were born that way? Because you see other people that have faced adversity and like, there are people that went through what I did as a kid and just gave up and decided like when the doctor told them you'll never walk again, they just took that answer. And me, I didn't. And I can't say I did anything. I can't say I'm awesome. And just like, it's just how I was built. So I don't know if this is trainable or if it's just something that's there. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
Phil, if this isn't trainable, there's a lot of books on the market that are full of shit. Because, I have a book from literally, I don't know when it was, 90s maybe, called Mental Toughness Training for Sport. But I'm looking on Amazon right now, mental toughness training for young athletes. There's just a bunch of them for every sport imaginable. I got to think that the psychologists have some pretty good mental training techniques for this kind of stuff. I guess I could ask my wife about some of this stuff. She's not a sports psychologist. But I hear what you're saying about the nature versus nurture. How much of this is genetic? Because we all know people who just kind of naturally fight back, and other people who tend to lay down. And you got to think that mental toughness training, it's going to augment some people better than others, right? At the very least.
Yeah, and it brings me back to like when I was training for that boxing match. Like I got in my first sparring match, and I was sparring with a pro boxer, And the big thing they told me is, like, for our first sparring match, they were like, we're not sure you can be a boxer yet because it depends on what you do literally when you get hit in the face. Like, we didn't know what I would do. And because I hadn't been in an altercation like that outside of a street altercation, which totally different. Like, in boxing, I need to stay within the confined set of rules when somebody punches me in the face. And everybody acts different. They're like, we just need to find out how you're wired. Because if you just go nuts or you run away, you're not a boxer. You know? And, like, I can see how it's trainable, but I think some of it's just there, you know? And I like to believe it's trainable because I tell people all the time, I think a big part of the reason I succeeded as far as I did in strength sports was due to that adversity early in age, and I just learned how to fight. But, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I would add, so I guess let me ask you this, Phil, since you work with a lot of kids now, and I think this is across the board almost as far as like that kind of spirit weakening as with parenting, where how many times did you sign up for something and then your parents were like, oh yeah, if you don't want to go, you don't have to go.
Yeah.
And like, so the aspect of being put in a situation like the kids here who do really well, they're like, once they sign up, their parents are like, no, you're just going. The other option is not even on the table. Like, they kick and scream or whatever, and it's like, nah, you're going. No, you're going. And there's an aspect of that I think is not as, I don't know, that is definitely not as normal as it used to be. Like, when I signed up for something as a kid, it's like I had to go through the whole season. And there's huge chunks of what I signed up for that it's like I didn't like the first aspect at all. And sometimes it's like, as a kid, you're like, oh, I'm not immediately good at this, so whatever. And then developing some curiosity along the way. And then being like, oh, okay, I really like this now. Like, I sucked at basketball when I first started. Yeah. And I hated it, and I hated going. And something clicked eventually, but it was because, like, I just had to go. Like, you know, burn the boats. You're just going this way. Yeah, I mean, whatever happens, but you need to just get in this. Like, you're going forward. We are not going backwards.
Yeah. No, I think that is a problem. I think it's a change in the, like, we have a group of kids that haven't faced adversity. Like, they've been told from this, they just got to do what they wanted to do. And so that hurts us. But, I mean, the whole nature versus nurture thing, it makes me think of, like, talking to high-level people at, like, high-level college and NFL things. Like, mentally, they're looking for, like, offensive linemen. They want them to be smart, like 4.0 students, things like that. Defensive linemen, they want a inner city kid from a broken home and things like that, which leans more towards the nurture side. Like, they want a kid on that side of the ball that's just had a tough life, and they've learned how to just be pissed off, which makes sense. And that leans more towards it's something you can nurture and make happen. But, God, how do we do that? How do I make a kid aggressive by just making his life shit? You know, it's unethical for me. So how do I take a regular kid and find that animal? That's hard. That's the hardest thing for me as a coach. Like, I have physically gifted kids that are, you know, hell, we got one kid that's like 6'5", 340 and wears a size 19 shoe as a sophomore.
Oh,
it's like,
Jesus.
how do I bring out the animal in him? Because he's a freaking teddy bear.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, dude, it's like, you got to learn, like, here, this is a contrived situation. You need to just turn it on and rip heads off. Like, it's okay to do it out here. This is your avenue. It's your outlet.
Well, you know, if there's any psychologists listening, they're probably like, these guys are just floundering. They're not, you know, they're amateur psychologists. We are. We're just discussing it, right? Because there's so many things you can think about with mental toughness. Jarrell was kind of pointing to, like, discipline. No, you're going to practice. Well, I'm not immediately good at it. I don't care. You're going to practice. You know, you're talking about getting your bell rung, right? And how do you immediately, because, man, I identify with that. I was in a kendo tournament and I got rocked. I mean, you might think, well, you got the men on, right? You got on that helmet. You get rocked between the eyes with a baseball bat. Yeah. And you have milliseconds to refocus or it's coming back at you again, right? It's like there's, you know, you pop off again. I got another fresh one for you, you know? So you got to be real careful with, I think, how we're defining the toughness? Is it the immediate, like, keep your focus after and not be hysterical, in the moment? Is it discipline? Is it, like you're saying, aggression? Like, let's get the kid who knows to turn on, the anger and the aggression to make it happen beforehand. There's a lot of things that go into this equation, aren't there?
Yeah. And like you said, a big part of it is how you react to adversity. And, like, you need to become more hyper-focused. Like, something really bad just happened. You need to not get mad about it. You need to channel that into just more focus. Okay, straighten up. Got punched in the face. Get your hands up.
Hands up.
Not,
Right.
Or freak out and just start swinging or run. I mean, you have to just get more calm, more focused, and on task. So, and that's a hard one. And like I said, I mean, there are ways to do it, maybe, but, like, most of the ways I can think of are unethical. Like, I just can't beat these kids up.
Mm-hmm. Make them salty. Yeah.
And just, like, here's your adversity. Wow. Just start hitting them and, like, you need to come at me. Huh? No, coach, I'm going to run. You're hitting me with a stick.
I will say my favorite way to, this is just kind of like a personal theory of mine, especially with, kids, and even if kids have no reason at all to be in this good of shape, is like, and some of it's because I started with some of my first stuff was like Joe DeFranco's, like, West Side for Skinny Bastard stuff, but also the Prowler Challenge, and, like, being like, oh, and then doing it in a parking lot by myself and puking and all that stuff. But, like, the Prowler or sled type stuff, like, because you can always take another step and then you'll be fine tomorrow. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we'll know you're going to be fine. Like, or at least the way I do it, I suppose. Some idiot could destroy a kid with the sled or whatever, like the Iowa football team or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you can kind of add on to that each week much easier.
Yes.
Because it feels better, but then, like, the kid kind of sees, like, all right, I was uncomfortable and that felt really bad, but I survived, and then next time they, show up and they do it again and they're better.
Yes.
It's one of those things where they start to, when they see it almost immediately, like, pretty quick, and they don't dread it, they let themselves, like, have the experience. They, just in terms of mental strength, toughness, they start looking forward to that. They're like, can we do the sled today? Versus, like, oh shit, we're doing the sled today. Like, that shift happens at some point within that. But as a coach, I mean, it's hard to get those wins in a situation where someone could quit after that first experience.
Yeah.
Like, having to sell you the experience and say, you're going to do this, horrible, god-awful thing. It's going to feel miserable and all this. And then at some point in the future, you're going to run through this and be like, oh, that was not a big deal at all. It's hard to believe for, like, a young mind. But when you get to an adult even, it's like, if you didn't build it at some point, it's, like, really tough to...
No.
It's like your brain calcifies or something.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from. Like, a big dose of what my boys are going to get is, like, it's time to break out the sleds and just multiple endless rounds of 5 seconds going hard, very short rest type of things, which does build mental toughness over time. But what muddies the equation is when that sled is now another individual with a brain. Because, like, the kids don't doubt, well, I can beat the sled if I just try hard enough. As long as I don't put 1,000 pounds on it or whatever. They know in their mind, but you add another individual in there that's strong-willed, and it's easy to doubt, like they're going against the other kid's star player, and they know we've got film. Like, a lot of kids will just have doubt. Like for me in athletics, I've always been like, give me your best. I want to go against the best person, and I want to prove what I got. But some kids they're not wired that way. It's like they might be the most talented person, but they're mentally a little, for lack of better terms, weak. And the minute they're facing the other best, they let doubt come into their head. I don't know if I'm good enough. And you just lost. Like, it's like I talked about at the seminar. If you're coming up to a bar, Like Jarrell's seen it 1,000 times. If you have an athlete coming up to a bar and they don't just believe they can snatch and clean and jerk what they're about to do, they're probably not going to do it. And it's the same way, like if you're facing an adversary on the field or a ring, and you just, even if you're physically better, but if you mentally don't think you can win, you're in trouble. And that's hard to train. It's hard to get somebody. It's like telling somebody, like, I'm stressing about this. Well, just stop stressing. Oh, yeah, that'll work. It doesn't work.
Yeah, there's a personality type issue here because to me, like introverts have to work real hard to quiet their internal dialogue, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on between their ears. And sometimes I almost wish when I've been in sports settings that I was dumb because then I could just be like the animal in the moment, you know? That happens a lot. I've heard people, even like in some of the weightlifting seminars that you've done, Phil, they're like, you know, I'm worried about, you know, fire this and then hip hinge that. No. And then, you know, and they talk themselves into failure instead of just being in the moment. And there's a kendo term for that too. I'm not going to keep boring people with this kind of stuff, but yeah, that being that in the moment and quieting the internal dialogue, I think it's harder for some people. I would probably think my bias would be that the more intelligent you are, the more internal dialogue, the more you're thinking, and you got to try to not, right? You got to not.
Yes. And that's what I was going to say. It's basically that. You got to teach athletes how to not think. Like, they shouldn't be thinking anything. The last thing they should be thinking is, am I better than this guy? Like, and a lot of that's gained through millions of reps. Like, I'd say the best people out there just rely on their training. Like, I don't need to think, I just need to do. At this point, like whatever you're competing in, like once you step on whatever field you're competing in, there's no thinking anymore. Thinking's for training. Thinking's for my linemen is when we're doing drills.
That's right.
Like, now you get out there and you just need to rely on training. And that's tough, man. It's tough to turn, like, how do you teach a kid to turn their head off and just do what they know? Like, that's that old drilled a million times.
Yeah. There's an old coaching saying or aphorism or whatever about when under duress, we revert to our training, right? And that's why a lot of these sports, whether it's martial arts or whether it's, you know, Olympic lifts, it's repetition, because you burn in those pathways. But now I feel like we're in Mike's realm, right? I mean, we got a neurology prof here. We should ask Mike, like, can you train this stuff? To what extent? How far do you guys go into the psych stuff, Mike, as opposed to motor learning and stuff?
Oh, I mean, the hard part is, from my perspective, is it's all of the above, right? On the psychology side, you can look at some of the research that's been done, like on the concept of grit, which has some interesting things. I think mental toughness is kind of overplayed as a term, but everyone kind of knows what you mean with that. I'm a bigger fan of more like mental or psychological flexibility. Like, how can you adapt to different situations with a different mindset even? And how do you train that? Just like on the physical side with training like football, how can you be on and ready to go for the play? Maybe a little bit amped up, but not too much. And then how can you completely relax when you're getting ready for the next play, right? And you talk to people, like a bunch of buddies of mine who coach a lot of NHL pros. They've said multiple times that, you know, a new person comes in a league who's just this sympathetic monster, is on all the time, like does really well for 1 to 3 years and then disappears and nobody ever sees him again. All right. Same with powerlifting, same with most sports. And if you watch the older pros, especially in NFL, NHL, where we know the age of them and you know the level that they're playing at, most of those people are really good at being on when they need to be on and then off when they need to be off. And I think that's something you can train to some degree. And then on the skills side, I think of like the concepts of that the military uses pretty well, like stress inoculation. So exposing someone to just a little bit more of a stressor, just like you would expose them to overload in the gym, that over time you can get used to that. Now, you may not completely get rid of all the inherent reflexes, like even advanced military people that are, you know, doing something in the house where they have to hit certain targets. Yeah, they're still going to have a little bit of a flinch response, but it's much more muted and much more controlled compared to people who are new who are just like all over the place, right? Because the stress is just too far beyond them. And then the last one of the other phrases I got from Dr. Cobb was, like you were talking about, Phil, like, do the drill, forget the drill.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a time and a place to be conscious of what you're doing during practice, right? So if you look at Maslow's kind of like the 4 steps he had of motor learning, at first you're just unconsciously incompetent. Like, you don't even know what the hell you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
The next step is, can you be consciously incompetent? Like, oh, now I know what I'm doing wrong. And then can you be, consciously competent? And then can you be unconsciously competent? Like, at the highest level, I don't think elite NFL wide receivers are worrying about their gait pattern or where their arms are.
Yeah.
They're focused on the execution of what they need to do in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can kind of get there by having people in practice say, okay, now we're going to do this drill. Here's the purpose of this drill. Yes, you're going to try to get better at this skill. And then there's that transition where, okay, it's game time. Here's the route I want you to run. And hopefully that skill set is unconscious enough that it'll show up when you need it to show up.
Yeah, and part of it, like, once you're in a full contact sport, it's hard.
Oh,
because I think the way
years and years and years.
Yeah, and that's because, like, with powerlifting, it's not a contact sport. Whatever. How do I get somebody to be better at meets? We do a lot of meets.
Yeah.
The more meets they do, the more comfortable they get. Whereas a full contact sport, like, I can't have a boxer just go box all the time. They'll just be beat up. Or football. Like, we have a lot of rules now. Rules that maybe have gone too far as contact and practice. Like we couldn't do contact in practice. So yesterday, it was a shocker for him, because it's totally different. Walk through speed and things like that. Playing patty cake on bags is a lot different than another 300-pound dude hitting you in the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of it. Brings me back to, like, when I was training for my last meet to squat 800. It was a mental shift. Like, in my head, every training session, I was thinking about not the training session. I was thinking about when I was squatting 7, I was thinking about the 8. Like, this is 8. And maybe that's a shift you can do and just get these kids to, like, literally what you're doing is, like, you need to think about how you're going to do this on the field. This is against another person. And again, that's harder than, like, I know how to explain it, but it's hard to get somebody else's head to work that way. Like, it's easy to say that. It's just like I said. I mean, I'll say it again. Like, telling somebody to quit stressing about what they're stressing about. Usually what happens is the opposite. Then they stress about not stressing about that thing. And it's a weird thing.
Yeah. Like, ecological models of, high-level coaching, like my buddy Sean Mishka and Tyler Yerby do a lot of work in this area is, Franz Bosch has written a lot about this, setting up a controlled environment of a drill that you want the athlete to select the better outcome, but you're not necessarily telling them what to do. You're not saying, okay, run down to this cone and touch it and come back. You're setting up like an engineering problem. You're setting up the constraints of the system that they play in, and then you would tell them what the outcome looks like, and then you're letting them figure out the best solution on their own, which I think is a better coaching dynamic, but it's also a whole system and a skill set that most people have never been taught either.
That's funny, actually. I was literally gonna bring exactly that up because there's a huge push in this in jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
The ecological approach versus the Brazilian guys, they love, like, you do the drill and you just drill it as is.
Yep.
But the ecological guys give you constraint-based, style with whatever it is. I'm not going into jiu-jitsu stuff. But what I was going to mention was the concept of play within that.
Yes.
Like, developing a mindset of being playful and then building intensity over time. Because, and there's he was on Joe Rogan. He used to be George St. Pierre's coach. I think his name was Firas Zahabi or something like that.
Yeah.
He talked about the Russian Russian wrestling versus American wrestling style. And one of the things that stood out was just like the concept of play within what they do, like just relaxed play all the time without building in the intensity. And then over time, your intensity just goes up because your level of, you're able to like make adaptations on the fly quickly rather than, be so fixed on this is how the outcome is supposed to be and this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I literally was thinking, just going to bring that up in this context with developing like a playful mindset in terms of a combat sport or a physical, like, you versus someone else physically. And I've only recently realized the advantages of this, where it's like, no, the outcome on the other side, you almost like dissolve the shame of it, where you're just playful the whole time. And then how good you get over time when you're like destroying someone and then the ability to just laugh afterward. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
No, that makes total sense. And I mean, that's one thing I think but again, that's muddy because like, is the person just wired that way? Like, I like it when I'm on a field or a platform or in the ring. Like, I'm okay with somebody doing something good against me, and it doesn't affect me. It's like, oh, good hit, but I'm coming back, and that takes a special kind of mindset. Like, if some kid just nails the shit out of you on the football field, a lot of people will come away from that scared from that point on. You have to have this short memory. Like, oh, he got me that time.
Memory.
That's okay. Yeah, you do. You really do. You have to just forget it and move on. And he won't get me next time. I'm going to rely on my training. I know I'm good. And, it was the same thing with me getting hit in the face for the first time. What it did, it just clarified me. Oh, that was my fault. It wasn't a thought in my head that, oh, he's just better than me. I'm scared now. No, I screwed up, didn't have my hands up. Fix that. And it was my internal dialogue with myself. Like, that's my fault. Fix that. Move on. And then go mindless and just rely on your training. But it's tough, man. But
it's so complex. I mean, I suggest listeners, I was just looking this up. You guys might have heard about in the news in the last year or two, the warrior gene.
Yeah.
It sounds like the title of a book, but it's monoamine oxidase A. I'm looking it up right now. But yes, it's related to aggression and other things. It's also antisocial and criminal gene. So there's a fine line, but there's a ton of stuff. NewScientist.com has a big history of it. I guess I'm just bringing it up because clearly it's built into someone's blueprints. Like, are you aggressive? Are you not aggressive? But of course, human behavior is so complex. I mean, how many different genes are at work? And then multiply that by how many different environmental cues. Wow. So it's got to be, I would think, ultimately, even if you're naturally like this, it's one thing not to get your bell rung and avoid being hysterical, right? That's a good step. But it's also one not to get your bell rung and then launch yourself at the dude to kill him.
Yes.
Nearest
it's a totally different thing. Exactly. And that was what I talked about with the boxing. Like, they didn't know if the person's just going to go batshit. From what I'm working with, like right now, it's those naturally aggressive kids. Like, I'm working with kids as low as 5, and some of them just get it. And they know that, like, I'm in a violent sport and they love it. And it's easier for me to get those kids to back off than it is to get a gentle kid to, like, no, hit him. It's okay. You know, you need to, it's easier the other way around. And the hard part is sometimes you'll get these genetic, like, kids that are genetically, physically built for the sport, but their mind isn't. And that's the hard one, man. And so,
do you think another thing, which I stole this blatantly from Brett Bartholomew from his, I think he talks about it in Conscious Coaching, that I think we tend to forget about, like, what is, and it's hard when kids are really young, but, like, what is the passion? Like, what, do they really want to do the thing? Or do their parents enroll it in them?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And I think the people who are really passionate about that outcome, like, I think about, me trying to learn kiteboarding and all that kind of stuff. Like, I just wanted to learn to do the thing, and I knew that just meant a lot of crashes and a lot of horrible shit along the way. But I kind of stuck with it because I kind of had an idea of what the end goal was, and it was something I wanted to do. I wonder with athletics, how many kids like really want to be there, and the kids who really want to be there, do they have that reason to kind of push through and to get up again versus the kids where, my parents just dropped me off here for a couple hours.
No, definitely. There's definitely a difference there. But,
doesn't cover everything.
that goes back to our nurture and nature thing.
Sure.
They're just wired. And that's what I talked about at the seminar. Like, literally, you need to find what you love as far as the fitness field. It's so vast. And the sports world, it mix it all together. Like, of course, you're going to excel at something you just love. Yeah. Because you'd lose time in it. Like, find that thing that you can do for 8 hours and it feels like you did it for 30 minutes. That's what you need to go for. So, and is there one of those things for everybody? I hope so. Maybe there isn't.
I'd be torn on that aspect just because I feel like sometimes it takes a long time to develop a passion in a thing.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You don't even understand the thing until you're in it for a year or 2 years, whatever it is. Like, you don't even understand the aspect of like what you're doing, whether you enjoy it or don't enjoy it, etc., until you're in it for like, if we, took people, you had one county in the country where you like took people and you said, you have no option. Like, there's no other option. You have to go work out, and you work out with the best coach who's not like, he understands your capabilities and isn't like a, torture specialist or something. Right? And you made them work out. After a year of like making them work out consistently, let's say you took it away for a week, they would recognize how much worse they feel than when they were in it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like that, then you would understand like what's happening, like what it is. At least like they would understand it.
Yeah.
But there's so many things where it's like you just have to get in it, and like, because even Mike with the the kiteboarding it's like, I wanted to get into this, and like, I'm sure you were aware of the bumps and bruises and the process, but I wasn't like, I don't know, it's not something like you dwelled on like, oh, I'm gonna get a lot of bumps and bruises. It's different with, I mean, this panel, us in general, where we've done something is still unique. Some people just don't want to do anything. Like, they just don't. And you, like, there's no, option to, like, push them into it necessarily. But we would all join something. Look at all the hobbies we do that we just show up to just because,
Yeah.
Like,
well, and like you're going on there, there's also that, like, I've had kids that are like, they're truly passionate. Like, it is their life to be like an NFL player. But they're genetically just, it ain't going to happen for you, bud. That's the sad part. Or you have the opposite. Like, you've had people make the NFL, like Chris McCoy. I listened to his interview not long ago. He hated every single rep of football he played. Despised it.
Yeah.
But he did it because it got his family out of South Africa, and like, it bettered his family. Like, where's that drive come from? Like, you literally spent years doing a sport you hate, but your drive was external from that sport. It was, it was betterment of your family through this. And I'm sure that happens a lot in different models of like weightlifting and things. You go to China and stuff and you're just prescribed, like, your measurements say you're a weightlifter. But like, you get housing and food and your family's going to be good as long as you're on the team. Well, that's a big incentive, coming from a third world country. So, I mean, that tells me you can do it. It's
a good conversation about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. You know, you got to think, though, the internal drive is always the best case scenario, as far as I was always taught, like, intrinsic motivation is the real key to success. I know what you're saying about this guy's gifted, but imagine if he loved it too. The whole scenario feels better. The whole scenario just feels better.
For sure. Yeah. And probably be even better than he was.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But, so anyway, we could ramble for hours.
We could.
And, so we'll call it a day. But please, listeners, if you have any input on this, share it. We'd love to hear your stuff. So
yeah, email. You can email. You can go to our YouTube backup, like we addressed, today. That's an easy way to reach out. You can just search for Iron Radio on YouTube and leave us a comment.
Yep. Awesome.
And if you're looking for a book that's tangentially related, that's really good, look up Behave by Dr. Robert Sapolsky. He goes into a lot of the, aggression and why humans do what they do. And I have it on my list to actually finish said book at some point. It's massive, but it's like $25 or something, pretty cheap. And he's like done tons of research in like just the behavior area too. So check that one out.
Sweet. All right, everybody. Until next week.
See ya.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community.
The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.